Behind the heavy wooden doors of the royal residences, tension has reached an explosive boiling point that no one inside the institution anticipated. What was meant to be a quiet, routine afternoon engagement centered around rural development at the Royal Horticultural Hall suddenly erupted into an unprecedented royal crisis. Princess Anne, a steadfast pillar of royal duty who has served the crown for over 5 decades without a single trace of personal scandal, was standing beside a featured exhibit wearing her structured navy coat and signature brooch. She was diligently working her way through a line of local dignitaries, following a strictly timed schedule that had been planned down to the minute. But everything ground to a sudden halt when Laura Lopes, the daughter of Queen Camilla, walked into the hall through a secondary side entrance. What immediately raised red flags for security personnel was that Laura Lopes was not on the official guest list for the main stage. She was never scheduled to attend this function, yet she moved through the gathered crowd with unwavering intent. Stepping directly toward the Princess Royal, she paused briefly, waited for a momentary hush in the room, and then stepped forward. Bypassing every standard rule of royal protocol, she offered no curtsy or customary greeting. Instead, in a tone witnesses described as sharp and noticeably loud, she accused Princess Anne of orchestrating recent changes to estate funding as a deliberate, personal insult to her family. The atmosphere in the hall froze instantly. To air a private family grievance in front of reporters and attendees at a public event was not a momentary lapse in emotional control. It was a calculated move designed to force a public spectacle. Yet, Princess Anne's reaction demonstrated precisely why she remains one of the most respected figures within the monarchy. She did not flinch, nor did she raise her voice. She stood still for 3 full seconds while total silence fell over the room, carefully adjusted her gloves, and turned around with absolute composure. Rather than validating the accusation or engaging in a public argument, she turned to her security detail and quietly asked if the team had thoroughly verified the afternoon guest list. It was a swift, surgical dismissal that effectively stripped the attack of its momentum. Flustered and turning visibly red, Laura stepped closer, accusing Princess Anne of hiding behind protocol and orchestrating secretive estate audits specifically designed to target Queen Camilla's relatives. Her voice carried across the room, prompting journalists in the back to scramble for their notebooks. At the exact same time, a freelance photographer stationed in the hall captured the entire interaction on camera, the sound of the shutter clicking rapidly under the rain beating against the glass roof. Princess Anne calmly signaled her protection officer, who stepped in firmly to escort Laura away from the main floor to the lobby, making it clear that her presence was no longer appropriate. The aftermath was immediate. Palace security initiated an urgent investigation into how an uninvited guest managed to bypass strict entrance protocols. Logs revealed that a regional director, a distant acquaintance of Camilla's family, had added Laura's name to the access list at the last minute without authorization. By that evening, the director was suspended, and palace officials began reviewing all regional event security measures. Even more suspicious was the discovery that Queen Camilla's private vehicle had been spotted idling just 3 blocks from the venue for 15 minutes before driving away precisely as the confrontation ended, raising serious questions about whether this was an orchestrated test of the palace's boundaries. When Prince William received the briefing during a high-level conference call, he ended the meeting immediately. Furious at the blatant disrespect shown to his aunt, he ordered his chief of staff to secure the raw video footage from the venue. Sitting in his office, William watched the recording on a large display, observing every detail of the interaction. Seeing the calculated nature of the breach, he decided that patience was no longer an option. He contacted King Charles directly, stating in clear terms that he was taking full control of the disciplinary process and internal security oversight. Recognizing the severity of the incident, the king gave William full authority to take whatever actions were necessary to protect the integrity of the crown. As the fallout from the Horticultural Hall confrontation spread through the administrative network of the palace, the ride back in the official state vehicle marked a turning point in Princess Anne's strategy. Sitting in the rear seat, staring straight ahead with her hands folded neatly over her handbag, the Princess Royal remained entirely silent for the duration of the journey. She did not reach for her phone, nor did she engage in casual conversation with her senior aide. Instead, she was methodically replaying every second of the confrontation in her mind, dissecting the exact timing of the words used against her, and evaluating the precise nature of the security breach. For someone who has operated within the strict framework of royal duty for more than half a century, protocol is not merely a set of outdated rules. It is the fundamental mortar that keeps the entire structure of the constitutional monarchy together. When she finally spoke, her voice was completely devoid of emotion, asking only about the employment status of the regional director who had signed off on the unauthorized entry pass. Upon receiving confirmation that the director had already been suspended from his post, and nodded slowly, remarking that security breaches of such magnitude were unacceptable and that the protection of the institution always begins at the front entrance. Notably, she never once referred to Laura Lopes by name, classifying the entire ordeal simply as a serious breach of decorum. However, the reason Princess and had not shut the confrontation down immediately became clear during her quiet calculations. She could have summoned her protection officer the second Laura raised her voice, using her royal status to silence the room instantly. Instead, she had deliberately chosen to pause and let the scene unfold for those critical extra moments. She was gathering intelligence, carefully observing the reactions of everyone present in the hall to identify who in the crowd might be aligned with her challenger. When reviewing the official attendance log provided by her aide, her eyes locked onto the names of 3 local journalists well known for their close ties to Queen Camilla's personal circle. Standing at the perimeter of the room, those journalists had been watching the scene unfold with intense focus, proving that this was not an isolated outburst of personal frustration, but rather a coordinated attempt to orchestrate a public spectacle. For months, Princess and had served as the primary obstacle against Camilla's family securing greater administrative authority over estate management, having personally mandated the rigorous audit that threatened their financial influence. Realizing that confidential details regarding the classified audit had been leaked, and placed a private call to a trusted contact within the security services, requesting an immediate trace on all internal email communications related to the estate review to identify the source of the breach. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Prince William had entered full administrative control mode. Walking into the main briefing room at precisely 5 minutes past 6, he placed his encrypted mobile device on the polished wooden conference table where 5 senior advisors were seated, each holding an urgent report on the afternoon's events. Without taking off his coat, William pointed to the wall display and played the raw video footage obtained from the freelance photographer. The sound of camera shutters clicked sharply through the room's speakers as the entire interaction played out. When the clip concluded, William switched off the screen with a single motion and turned to the director of palace security, demanding an immediate explanation as to why an individual restricted from official engagement lists was permitted entry. Before the director could offer a justification, William cut him off, asserting that he did not require excuses, but rather the exact identity of the staff member who had bypassed screening protocols, adding that the individual would be relieved of their duties before the morning news cycle began. This swift action was part of a larger, ongoing effort by Prince William to clean the household of staff whose loyalties lay with Queen Camilla's extended family. Reviewing a secure internal file tracking connections between household personnel and outside influences, William uncovered that the pressure to approve the unauthorized guest list had originated from a mid-level manager married to a personal assistant in Camilla's private office. Acting without hesitation, William instructed security personnel to escort the manager out of the building immediately while suspending the personal assistant pending a comprehensive internal review, declaring Queen Camilla's private office a restricted zone where no movement of personnel or documentation could occur without his explicit written authorization. William sent an unmistakable message throughout the palace hierarchy. Authority resided firmly with the heir to the throne, and any division of loyalty would be met with immediate termination. Simultaneously, reports surfaced detailing a series of confidential phone calls made between Queen Camilla's private residence and a major legal firm in the city, aligning perfectly with the timeline of the estate audit. Suspecting that assets subject to recovery under the audit were being shielded through external legal maneuvers, William consulted his chief legal counsel to explore options for freezing the accounts in question. Although advised that technicalities surrounding external trusts created legal hurdles, William remained firm, ordering a comprehensive review of all property titles under inspection. Driven by a deep resolve to protect the long-term dignity of the crown for future generations, William recognized that allowing internal corruption and public scandals to go unchecked would compromise the stability of the monarchy itself. He instructed his team to enforce absolute containment over the next 48 hours, warning that any individual leaking information to the media would face severe contractual penalties. Concluding his evening, William reaffirmed his strategy with King Charles, preparing a formal decree designed to permanently remove non-working family members from official palace operations. While the operational machinery inside Buckingham Palace shifted toward total administrative containment, a vastly different reality was unfolding at the quiet country estate where Laura Lopes sat in a dimly lit living room. Surrounded by half-packed cardboard boxes, she stared at the glowing screen of her tablet, scrolling through an endless stream of online news articles and intense public commentary. The digital reaction had been swift and brutal, with millions of interactions questioning her motives, criticizing her demeanor, and demanding accountability for her public confrontation with Princess Anne. What had begun as an impulsive attempt to stand up for her family's financial position had rapidly spiraled into an institutional catastrophe. The quiet resentment within her family had been building for months, triggered when Queen Camilla's office staff were reassigned to central administrative pools. Travel budgets were sharply reduced, and security details were systematically withdrawn from non-working family members. Once accustomed to moving freely within the inner circles of the monarchy, Laura and her siblings suddenly found themselves treated as unwanted outsiders, facing an abrupt and painful exile from royal life. The situation grew even more critical when her brother entered the room, holding an official letter from their primary banking institution. The document requested immediate verification for all financial transfers exceeding £5,000, a clear indication that Prince William's internal audit had penetrated their private financial affairs. They were being squeezed from every side, systematically stripped of the access and privileges they had taken for granted for years. Looking around at the packed boxes, Laura reflected on the abrupt order to vacate the estate offices by the end of the week. Her deepest frustration stemmed from her mother's complete public silence. She had expected Queen Camilla to use her influence to negotiate a compromise or enlist the king's intervention. But the queen had retreated to her private residence, offering no public defense or private assistance. When a courier arrived bearing an urgent package from Camilla's personal legal counsel, the enclosed letter offered a stark warning. Maintain absolute silence, as any further public statements would result in total legal severance from the royal estate and potentially trigger formal law enforcement reviews regarding unaccounted fund transfers. Realizing the full extent of the legal jeopardy they faced, Laura attempted to contact their private financial trustees, only to discover that the phone lines had been disconnected and their advisory access revoked. Stepping toward the window, she noticed that the security vehicles that had escorted her family for years were entirely gone, signaling that palace protection had been formally terminated. Stranded without institutional backing, she realized they were completely vulnerable to public scrutiny and legal accountability. Sitting in the dim light, the stark reality set in. Prince William had established a new operational standard, purging internal toxicity and ensuring that the monarchy would move forward without their influence. Meanwhile, in the basement communications center at Buckingham Palace, an emergency damage control meeting commenced at 6 in the morning. Senior communications strategists sat around a conference table reviewing live metrics that indicated over 4 million negative engagements across major digital platforms. The 12-hour delay in issuing an official statement had allowed wild speculation to fill the void, threatening the institution's public standing. When the communications director presented a drafted statement minimizing the event as a minor misunderstanding, senior aides rejected it immediately, pointing out that the public was demanding transparency regarding the internal family rift and the disrespect shown to Princess Anne. Concurrently, palace investigators made a breakthrough regarding the release of the event video. Tracing the footage, they discovered it had not been recorded by event staff, but by an independent journalist who had been provided security access codes by the same regional director who invited Laura. Financial records revealed that £10,000 had been wired to the journalist through a foreign shell company, while the regional director had received hidden payments totaling £100,000. Recognizing that the confrontation was an orchestrated attempt to damage the monarchy's reputation, Prince William convened an immediate press briefing with top investigative reporters. Speaking with absolute clarity and backed by forensic financial evidence, William outlined the timeline of the setup, framing the incident as a coordinated smear campaign driven by financial desperation. By exposing the corruption, William successfully shifted the public narrative from a petty family feud to a matter of legal integrity, neutralizing the threat and restoring institutional control. On Monday morning, the final resolution was sealed inside the Privy Council chamber. Standing before King Charles, Prince William presented a formal decree revoking the official status, estate funding, and administrative access of Queen Camilla's non-working family members. The king, recognizing the necessity of protecting the crown's survival over personal ties, signed the document in silence. Delivered to Queen Camilla's residence by noon, the decree was accepted without appeal or argument, marking a quiet retreat into total compliance. As William stood by his office window looking out over the palace courtyard, the long conflict had finally concluded. The boundaries were permanently redrawn, the internal threats purged, and the authority of the throne firmly secured for the future.